Okay, everyone, we're looking at key topic 3, Nazi control and dictatorship. Obviously, this is quite a important part of the course, and I think we will get a question about this. So, firstly, we've got to look at how Hitler went from being chancellor to being a dictator. Here is how he did it. In January 1933, Hitler became chancellor but had limited power. The Weimar Constitution restricted him, and Hindenburg had more control. These 5 events led to Hitler making Germany a one-party state. Event 1: the Reichstag fire, 27th of February 1933. The German parliament was set on fire. A communist supporter, van der Lubbe, was caught with firelighters. He confessed and was executed. How did Hitler respond? He blamed the communists for plotting against Germany. He ordered the arrest of 4,000 communists that night. What did Hitler ask Hindenburg to do? Declare a state of emergency, allowing Hitler to rule without approval and to call for a new election. So he used the situation to grant him emergency powers to do what he wanted. Very likely that van der Lubbe was set up because there were fires on 3 floors of the Reichstag. There were also security guards in these floors, and somehow van der Lubbe had managed to start a fire on all 3. So if you believe that, what did Hitler do with his new power? He passed the decree for the protection of the people and the state. It let him imprison political opponents, ban communist newspapers, instruct the police to ignore SR violence against communists, 70 deaths. So he's basically using it to destroy the communists so they can't challenge him in the elections. He got rich businessmen like Gustav Krupp to fund the Nazi campaign. It raised 3 million marks in one night. The election result and the significance: the Nazis increased their seats from 230 to 288. He banned the 81 communist seats, giving Hitler a two-thirds majority, enough to pass any law, and it was all done legally, sort of. Event number 2, the Enabling Act, March 1933. Hitler wanted a law allowing him to rule without a vote for 4 years. It was called the Law for the Removal of the Distress of the People and the Reich. Now, it's just the Enabling Act. We don't need to remember that one. The Nazis already had a two-thirds majority. Communists were banned and they couldn't vote, and the SR intimidated politicians into agreeing. The impact was that it was passed 444 to 94. This ended democracy in Germany. Hitler could now make any law without any opposition, and it was all done legally. Event number 3, banning other political parties, July of 1933. With the Enabling Act in place, Hitler removed all opposition and made Germany a one-party state. Key actions: he abolished all regional governments, all local councils. So that meant that all power was controlled by the Nazis in Berlin. He banned trade unions. He arrested leaders and made strikes illegal, so the workers can't even go on strike. The SR attacked the Social Democrat and Communist headquarters, and in July of 1933, all political parties except the Nazi Party were banned. Again, Hitler did this legally, so he used Parliament, or he used the Reichstag to be able to do it. The Night of the Long Knives. Why did Hitler think that Ernst Röhm was a threat? Hitler believed that Röhm, the leader of the SR, wanted to take power from him. Röhm had support from many of the 3 million SR members who respected him more than Hitler. These members didn't fully follow Hitler's oath. Röhm also openly opposed some of Hitler's ideas, which made Hitler nervous about Röhm gaining control of the Nazi Party. Additionally, Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS, was jealous of the SR and wanted the SS to be more powerful. What did Hitler do? He invited Röhm and 100 other SR leaders to a hotel for a meeting. Once there, they were arrested and put in prison. Over the next 4 days, 400 SR members were shot without a trial. A pistol was placed in Röhm's cell to encourage him to commit suicide, but he refused. 2 soldiers entered and then shot him. Ex-Chancellor von Schleicher was killed, and ex-Chancellor von Papen was interrogated. So much for those two claiming they could control the Nazis. They obviously could not. Death of Hindenburg. When Hindenburg died, Hitler became the most powerful person in Germany. He declared himself Führer, leader of Germany, combining the roles of president and chancellor. To secure his power, Hitler used the Enabling Act, again, to transfer all presidential powers to the chancellor position. He also forced every soldier in the army to take an oath of loyalty to him. How did Hitler do this legally? He held a public vote in which 90% of the population supported him. This was achieved through extensive propaganda and by making sure there were no real alternatives. Importantly, Hitler used legal means to gain full control. So, yeah, they had a vote, but there was no one else to vote for because he banned everybody. Also, he used his SR to intimidate people with guns and all the rest of it, to making sure they voted the right way. So, even though it looks legal, there was a lot of intimidation going on. The creation of a police state. After 1933, Germany was controlled by a police state. Anyone who said or did anything against the Nazis was punished. The fear this created was another way of keeping control, a deterrent to any form of opposition. The Nazi Party ran the police. The three main police units were the SS, the SD, and the Gestapo. The Nazis also created concentration camps. They controlled the courts and the judges. So that little introduction there, that's exactly how they created a police state. The SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, it was an organization that controlled all the other police units in Nazi Germany. It was responsible for enforcing Nazi policies and maintaining order, but also for carrying out violence and persecution, especially against those considered enemies of the state. SS expansion and power. So where do they go next? Basically, the role was expanded to give them control over all police organizations in Germany. They wore intimidating black uniforms to project power and fear. What do they do in the Night of the Long Knives? During this event, the SS was responsible for arresting and executing members of the SR. Size and power. It had grown to over 240,000 men who were granted the freedom to use any methods to protect the Fuhrer. The SS had to be entirely loyal to Hitler and the Nazi Party. Himmler, the leader, insisted that only pure Aryan men could join. Officers had to provide detailed family histories and birth certificates to provide prove their racial background before being accepted. The SD are the security service. I'll let you have a little read of that one when you want to pause it. And the Gestapo are the secret police, led by Reinhard Heydrich. The Gestapo didn't wear uniforms. It made them harder to recognize and more frightening. You didn't know where they were. People were genuinely scared that they could be around them at any time. They watched people. They listened to phone calls. They opened mail. They had informers who reported anyone who said anything against the Nazis. They tortured people to get confessions. People were scared of the Gestapo. They made arrests at night or early in the morning and sent people to concentration camps. Families often didn't know where their loved ones were. There were only 30,000 Gestapo agents for 80 million people, but the public thought they were everywhere. Teachers told children to report on their parents, even for anti-Nazi jokes. In 1939, the Gestapo arrested 160,000 people. Prisoners who got released warned others about the camps. It spread fear. Nazi courts and Nazi judges. All judges took an oath of loyalty to the Nazi Party, so they were biased. Priority of Nazi beliefs. This was more important than the law. Judges were told you must uphold Nazi beliefs. Under the Nazi system, it was the judge alone who decided if someone was innocent or guilty, no jury. Hitler set up a special people's court where trials were held in secret, often for political reasons. He could get rid of anyone he didn't like. In some cases, Hitler personally got involved and decided the punishment for individuals. Citizens had no legal right to challenge or appeal the verdicts given by the Nazi courts. Concentration camps were opened in 1933 and run by the SR and SS. One well-known camp that opened in 1933 was Dachau. The camps were set up in isolated areas away from public view. Germans could be sent to these camps for doing anything or saying anything that the Nazis didn't approve of. Types of prisoners: undesirables, people like prostitutes and homosexuals. Political prisoners: anyone seen as a threat to the Nazis and their ideas, including teachers, communists, journalists, and writers. Minority groups like Jews, Poles, and others. For example, Karl von Ossietzky, a German journalist, spoke out against the Nazis. He was arrested, and he died in the concentration camp in 1938. So you'd disappear if you said anything against the Nazis. Religion. Hitler needed to manage his relationship with key church ministers and pastors carefully. He wanted their support while ensuring they followed Nazi beliefs. Influential church leaders could sway public opinion and turn the German people against the Nazis. The Nazis and the church had opposing views. The Nazis promoted power, survival of the fittest, and conflict, while the church advocated peace and tolerance between religions. Hitler couldn't have full control over Germany. if the church influenced the views of ordinary Germans. The church still played an important role, especially in children's education. Catholic schools were popular and operated outside of the government's control, allowing them to teach religious beliefs. If the Nazis challenged religion too strongly, it could provoke opposition from other countries, especially if Hitler opposed the Pope's beliefs. Keeping both Protestants and Catholics on side was important. Both the Catholic and Protestant churches supported the Nazi Party in 1933 because they believed the Nazis were the only regime that could protect them from the threat of communism, because communism doesn't believe in religion. In communist Russia, churches were destroyed, priests were arrested and killed. This made the church scared and fear the spread of communism, and it led them to work with the Nazis, who saw them as a bulwark, which is like a defense against that threat. The Nazi Party aimed to control the power and influence of the Christian church in Germany. Initially, Hitler tried to reassure the church that working with the Nazi government would benefit them. In the early years, there was some cooperation between the church and the Nazis. However, it did not last long. By 1937, the Christian churches had lost much of their power, as they'd been Nazified, and their influence was significantly reduced under Nazi control. Nazi Party and the Catholic Church. Main disagreements: for the Nazis, Hitler was the leader, but for the Catholics, the Pope in Rome was the ultimate authority. Catholics had their own faith schools, which taught beliefs different from the Nazi-run education system. The Concordat. This was a deal between Hitler and the Catholic Church. Hitler agreed to let the Catholics worship freely and not interfere with their schools. The Pope agreed that the Catholic Church would not engage in politics and that German bishops would swear loyalty to the Nazi regime and not publicly criticize the Nazis. Hitler broke the agreement. Despite the agreement, Hitler violated it throughout the 30s. Priests were bullied, they were arrested, they were sent to concentration camps. Catholic schools were eventually forced to follow Nazi education guidelines. Catholic groups, like the Catholic Youth, were banned, and children were required by law to join the Hitler Youth after 1936. The Pope's response: he realized that the Concordat was ineffective, and he publicly criticized the Nazis in his speech with burning anxiety. In response, Hitler had over 400 Catholic priests arrested. Protestant Church. About two-thirds of Germans were Protestant. Germany was a founding country of the Protestant faith, and it had a strong traditional following. Many ordinary Germans felt more loyal to their traditional church than the Nazi-approved church. The Reich Church, 1936. Many Protestant churches decided to work with the Nazis and agreed to create the Reich Church, led by Ludwig Miller, who was made the Reich Bishop of Germany. This helped the Nazis gain support from the Protestant Church. Protestant leaders were allowed to continue their church services. Protestant pastors allowed the Nazi swastika in their churches alongside images of Hitler. Jews could not become members of the Reich Church. Opposition. Some Protestants, like Martin Niemöller, spoke out against the Nazis. He set up the Pastors' Emergency League to resist Nazi control, but in 1937, Niemöller was arrested and sent to a concentration camp. Propaganda and censorship. To achieve total control, the Nazi regime needed to control what the German public believed and how they thought. If Hitler wanted to Nazify the German people, he had to ensure that everything they watched, listened to, and did reflected Nazi ideas. This main goal was to synchronize all parts of German society, organizations, and government so that they all followed the same Nazi beliefs. This process of aligning everything with Nazi ideology was called Gleichschaltung. So Gleichschaltung is really important. It just means everything's made Nazi. The newspapers are all Nazi newspapers. The church is a Nazi church. Yeah, you probably can't reverse park anymore. You've got a Nazi park. But everything was Nazified. And all that is the term Gleichschaltung. Everything was following Nazi ideology and Nazi beliefs. Newspapers. The Nazi Party owned its own newspapers and took control of the press. Any information published in the newspapers had to be approved by Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda. That's what I mean by Gleichschaltung. Everything is Nazified. From 1933, Jewish editors and journalists were dismissed. Anti-Nazi newspapers were targeted, attacked, and shut down. 1,600 newspapers were closed in 1935. The press was heavily censored and told what could and could not be published. Key individual is Joseph Goebbels. He is the Minister for Propaganda. Advertising techniques. The Ministry for Propaganda used modern advertising methods to promote cheap radios, Nazi events and Hitler's speeches. They made sure every household had a radio so they could listen to Hitler's speeches. These were shortwave radios, so you couldn't listen to American or British programs. They employed new techniques such as bold colours, photo montages, and other propaganda methods, especially during the war. These techniques helped shape public perception and spread Nazi ideals effectively. Positive films about life in Nazi Germany were produced as propaganda. For example, The Triumph of the Will, 1935, showcased Nazi party rallies in 1934, and that was produced and directed by a woman called Leni Riefenstahl, who was a very famous filmmaker in Germany at the time. In 1933, over 250 million Germans visited cinemas, making film and newsreels a powerful tool for spreading Nazi ideas. Before every film, a 45-minute newsreel highlighting the achievements of the Nazi Party was shown. Any film had to be approved by the Ministry of Propaganda to make sure it was aligned with Nazi ideals. See, it's Gleichschaltung again. Radios and loudspeakers. All radio stations were brought under Nazi control. Hitler and other leading Nazis frequently made speeches on the radio. Cheap radios were sold to the German public, and by the late 30s, 70% of German homes had a radio. Every workplace was equipped with a radio, and loudspeakers were placed in public areas. Radios were designed to have a short range, preventing people listening to foreign broadcasts. Listening to stations like the BBC could lead to the death penalty. The radio was used to broadcast Nazi events, speeches, interviews, music, parades and rallies, anything that supported the Nazi regime. Sport. Goebbels saw sport as a tool to influence beliefs and build support for the Nazi Party, as well as to unite Germany. Sport was Nazified, see, Gleichschaltung again, to align with Nazi ideals. Sports stadiums were decorated with Nazi symbols. Goebbels ensured that all teams gave the straight-arm salute during the German national anthem. Even the England football team did it. Any victory in sport was portrayed as a victory for the Nazi Party. German victories were used to promote the idea of the Aryan race's superiority. Positive films about life in Nazi Germany were produced as propaganda, like, as we said, Triumph of the Will. In 1933, 250 million Germans visited cinemas, making film and newsreels a powerful tool for spreading Nazi ideas. I've said this, haven't I? Yeah, I have. Don't know why I've put this in twice, but there you go. Probably important to revise. Propaganda and censorship, the arts and culture. To fully control every part of German life, the Nazis censored the arts, which included literature, film, music, art, painting, and even architecture. Artists, writers, musicians whose work went against the Nazi beliefs were banned from showing their work. Many of them left Germany, fearing for their safety as they were targeted by the regime. The Reich Chamber of Culture, established in September of 1933 with Goebbels in charge, of course. Its role was to ensure all cultural activities aligned with Nazi beliefs. This process of making all parts of life conform to Nazi ideology was called Gleichschaltung. I think we know that phrase by now, don't we? The Reich Chamber of Culture banned any cultural expression that opposed Nazi beliefs. What was banned? Anything linked with the Jews, anything linked with being black or Negro, anything considered modern, the Nazis preferred traditional style, anything connected with the Weimar era, the period before the Nazis took over, anything not approved by the Nazi Chamber of Culture or by Goebbels. What was promoted? Anything that promoted a strong Germany, anything that supported German families and the traditional roles of men and women, anything that emphasized loyalty, discipline, and self-sacrifice for the country. Film in Nazi Germany. We've done this bit, haven't we? 45-minute newsreel featuring Nazi propaganda before you could watch your film. All the films had to be approved by the Nazis. Goebbels even created a propaganda cartoon called Hansi, modelled after Mickey Mouse. Hansi often battled villainous black crows with stereotypical Jewish features. You can see episodes of this on YouTube as well. Hansi the canary's got that little hair flick and a tiny little moustache. Wonder who he's meant to be. Music in Nazi Germany. Jazz and swing music were banned because they were linked to black people, whom the Nazis saw as inferior. These styles were also associated with the modern Weimar era and the freer roles of women, which the Nazis opposed. Hitler favoured Wagner because he was German and his music sounded heroic and powerful. The Nazis approved of Beethoven, Bach, and traditional German folk music. God, that must have been a laugh if you went to a concert. Literature in Nazi Germany. Books had to be approved by the Chamber of Culture before publication. Only books that promoted Nazi beliefs were allowed, others were banned. 2,500 writers were banned. Millions of books were removed from schools, libraries, and universities and burned in public. In 1933, students in Berlin burned 20,000 books by Jews, communists, and anti-Nazi authors, including works by Albert Einstein. Architecture. Nazis didn't like anything modern or futuristic, like had been the fashion in the Weimar period. New buildings had to make Germany look strong and powerful. Albert Speer became the most famous and most liked architect of Hitler. Speer built many projects such as the parade grounds for the Nuremberg rallies and new offices for the Nazis in Berlin. He built them as tall as possible, as size meant strength. They looked like great Roman buildings, so they looked grand and historic. Buildings included Nazi flags and symbols, so every aspect was linked to the Nazis. There's that word again, Gleichschaltung. Art in Germany. Hitler, who'd been an artist, set strict rules on what art was allowed. If you look at the bottom of the page here, there are two quite good paintings, aren't they? Guess who made those? Yep, Hitler did. Artists had to join the Reichschamber for Visual Arts to continue working. 42,000 were accepted. The Gestapo checked artists' studios to ensure they followed Nazi guidelines. In 1936, the Nazis removed 12,000 paintings from galleries, including works by Picasso and Van Gogh. Some were destroyed. I know some people say Van Gogh, but it's Vincent van Gogh. Trust me, I'm a doctor. Well, I'm not, but you know what I mean. Art. The Nazis disliked what was called degenerate art. In 1937, they held the Degenerate Art Exhibition to shame artists, but it was more popular than the official Nazi art exhibition. Oh dear. Approved art, traditional landscapes, classical art, military themes, and images of racial purity. Banned as degenerate, artists like Otto Dix and George Gross. Now, we looked at those. We looked at Weimar culture and art, and they showed the grotesque visions of Germany after the war. Hitler hated that. Art showing war negatively, expressionism, abstract art, ethnic art, anything linked to Jews or communists. Hitler said art's got to look like it's supposed to be. If you do anything that's expressionist, then obviously there's something wrong with you and you need to be sent to a concentration camp. So people didn't do it. Opposition towards the Nazi regime, political opposition, the Social Democratic Party. They printed anti-Nazi newspapers and tried to get support from other countries. They were arrested and sent to concentration camps. A military section of the SPD sabotaged railway lines and acted as spies and organized the German workers' resistance. Military and army opposition. General Beck, a high-ranking officer, led plots to assassinate Hitler in 1934 and 44. Tried to have him arrested in 1938. That didn't go well. 1944, a group of army officers, the Kreissaar Circle, attempted to kill Hitler with a bomb. Colonel Stauffenberg planted the bomb, but Hitler survived. The Nazis responded by executing 5,000 people. Turned it into a film with Tom Cruise. It's worth a look. Valkyrie. Trade unions and communists. The Communist Party encouraged workers to resist the Nazis. 150,000 communists were arrested, sent to concentration camps. 30,000 communists were executed. The Red Orchestra, a communist resistance group, spied on the Nazis and sent military information to Russia. Their leaders were caught and killed. German workers resisted in small ways, calling in sick or working slowly, especially on the Autobahn projects and factories, sabotaging ammunition factories by deliberately breaking machinery so they couldn't make weapons for war. George Elser, a worker and communist, planted a bomb in a beer hall where Hitler was due to speak in 1939. Hitler left early, bomb exploded at the exact time he was supposed to be speaking. The Edelweiss Pirates, the youth opposition, formed in the 30s, mainly teenagers in cities. Local groups had different names like Travelling Dudes and used the Edelweiss flower to recognize each other. Fortunately, the Nazis could recognize that too, so they got arrested. What do? Boys grew their hair long. They dressed in cool American clothes. They mocked, bullied, and attacked the Hitler Youth members. They went on long hikes, camped out, told Hitler jokes, sang anti-Nazi songs. So yeah, it's opposition, but it's not going to threaten the Nazis, is it really? The White Rose Group, a small student resistant group at Munich University led by Hans and Sophie Scholl. They illegally produced anti-Nazi leaflets in 1942 and 43, distributed them all around the university and town. They were caught giving out the leaflets, arrested by the Gestapo, put on trial by those Nazi courts in secret, and beheaded on the same day. Swing youth, wealthy middle-class teenagers from cities. What did they do? Well, they listened to banned jazz and swing music imported illegally from America. They met up to smoke, dance, and drink alcohol. They organized illegal dances, and some had over 6,000 attendees. So this kind of shows that not everybody is into what Hitler's saying. Some people are very against it. They oppose in this way. But does it threaten the Nazi regime? Not really. Why was youth opposition limited? Their actions, jokes, graffitis, leaflets, and songs were not enough to overthrow the Nazis. Most just wanted more personal freedom, not to bring down the regime. Their numbers were small. The Edelweiss Pirates had 2,000 members, the Hitler Youth had 8 million. Many young people accepted Nazi rule because they'd never known anything else. Fear of punishment discouraged stronger resistance. How did the Nazis react? 800 Protestant pastors sent to concentration camps. 400 Catholic priests were placed in a special priests' block in Dachau concentration camp. Why did so few members of the church oppose the Nazis? Too afraid to speak out? Key individuals only. Opposition was mainly led by a few brave individuals, not large groups. So in the youth, we know things about Hans and Sophie Scholl. In the church, we know people like Martin Niemöller, who's a case study here. Initially supported the Nazis, hated the Weimar Republic, was an ex-soldier, changed his mind. He opposed Nazi control over Protestant churches. He discovered the Gestapo was tapping his phone and spying on him. He publicly spoke out against the Nazis, arrested multiple times, sent to concentration camps for treason against the Nazi party. So these key individuals that speak out against the Nazis, they get closed down. They get sent to concentration camps. Okay, that is key topic 3. Really worth looking through that and revising it, especially the bits where it talks about the long knives and things like that. That's not really come up for a while. I think it might do. Okay, this is one of the 4. Please make sure you've looked through all 4 videos and do your checklist, and you should be ready for the exam. Good luck.